Hashem, today's Daf Yomi for Shabbos Kodesh is going to be Daf Nedarim Peiches, Nedarim 88. And so we're going to start on the bottom of Pei Zayin Amabez 87b at the Mishnah. If a person says, if a man says, Yodea Nishiyesh Nedarim, he says, listen, I know the man says, listen, I know that there is this concept that my wife made a vow, and I know, let's say she vowed that she's not allowed to drink wine, but I didn't know that I'm able to reject this vow. Excuse me. Then under those circumstances, you have fair. He's allowed to reject the vow. He didn't know that he was able to reject it, so therefore he's allowed to reject it. But let's say he says, I knew that I was able to reject the vow of Neder, but I didn't know that this was the category of vows that I could reject. I didn't know that this was a vow of Inoi Nefesh, that I could reject vows of Inoi Nefesh that are affliction of the soul, or vows that are Beinola Veina, between him and her. I didn't realize I could reject it. So Rameir Omer Lo Yaf. Rameir says that he cannot reject the vow, and the Chachamim say that he can. What's the reason why Rameir says cannot reject the vow? So the Ran gives two explanations for this. The Ran says as follows. The Ran explains, we're going to look at two reasons why Rabbi Meir says he can't reject the vow. One reason is because, says the Ran, is the Ran's first approach, that he can't reject it at all that first day. Why can he not reject it at all? Because since he doesn't realize that he can reject it, he doesn't have the proper understanding. Since he doesn't have the proper understanding, he can't reject it that first day. Comes along the second day, the time has already passed. Whereas the Chachamim say that he could reject it the first day, even though he doesn't have a proper understanding. The second approach is as follows: that when Rameir says you can't reject it, he only means later on, that you lost your opportunity. But the first day you could reject it. And the Chachamim are saying, no, he could reject it later on, because the first day wasn't really considered the day that he heard it, because he didn't realize he could reject it. So we're going to keep those approaches in mind, and we'll assume for now that it's the first approach as we read the Gemara, which is saying that the Ran is saying that since he didn't have the proper understanding of the first day, he can't reject the vow. Whereas the Chachamim say he could reject the vow even though he doesn't have the proper understanding. So according to this approach, Rameir is saying, if you don't have the proper understanding, it's not considered to be understanding or knowledge. In that context, the Gemara says, let's raise a contradiction about Rabbi Meir. Does Rabbi Meir really say if you don't have the proper understanding, it's not going to be considered understanding? Doesn't the verse say below Ra'us? It says that, and the Torah, it says that if you struck a person down without seeing them, it says below Ra'us that if you hit him down, you hit him with a stone without seeing on him, and then you have to go into exile. So why does it have to say without seeing him? Says the Gemara, Prat L'Suma, Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. This excludes the case of a blind person, that the blind person, even if he kills him, then he doesn't go into exile. And when it says that a regular person, if he doesn't see him, he goes into exile, but a blind person can't see. And so therefore the blind person doesn't go into exile. So it means to say the person who goes into exile, the murderer, has to be somebody who generally speaking can see. But the blind person can't generally speaking see, and so therefore he's being excluded. Whereas Rameir says, but Rabbo says the Summa. No, even the blind person is included in this verse, because the Summa, the blind person can understand, and there's somebody who's next to him. And so therefore, the blind person is also going to go into exile if he kills accidentally. So the Gemara assumes that there's a contradiction here between Rabbi Meir, because Rabbi Meir here is saying that you have partial knowledge, you have partial ability to discern, that's considered knowledge, and therefore you're going to go into exile. Whereas in our Mishnah, Rabbi Meir says partial knowledge is not enough to reject the vow. Says the Gemara, comes along and says, Amarava Hachamein Yana Dikra, the Gemara says, Rabbi comes along and says, no, don't say that that's the reason why Rabbi Meir is saying it. Don't say that Rabbi Meir is rejecting here because partial knowledge is knowledge. That's not the reason, but rather it's because it's based upon the verse. Rabbi Yehuda Sava, Rabbi Yehuda, who says that the blind person doesn't go into exile, he says, Gabe Rotzeach, by a murderer, it says that you Vasher Yavo Esrael Bayar. It says about the murderer, you come and you comes upon his friend in the forest, meaning to say, then, and he kills him accidentally, he goes into exile. Kol Davar Miyal Yar. Anybody who goes into the forest is going to anybody who goes into the forest is going to have to go into exile, included under that jurisdiction. A blind person also is somebody who goes into a forest. So if you say the words that he killed him without seeing is coming to include the blind person, then miyar naftale. We could have learned it out from the forest. So it must be that counterintuitively, we must say the opposite. That below ra'os, that if you didn't see, is praslutuma. It's coming to exclude the blind person. So if the blind person does not go into exile, that's Rabbi Yehuda's position. Whereas Rabbi Meir, who says that the blind person, that partial knowledge, it's not that because he holds that partial knowledge is knowledge. Why does he say the blind person goes into exile? So it's coming to say as follows. It's coming to say, according to Rabbi Meir's other position is it states, Buidas, that it says in that verse in Deuteronomy, it says he killed this person without knowledge. So therefore, since Rabbi Meir says, since it says Bevuidas, Kol Davar Meida, anybody who knows when he throws a stone, where the stone is going to fall. The blind person doesn't know exactly where the stone is going to fall. And so therefore, the blind person should be excluded from the city of refuge. And if you want to say when he says without seeing, it comes to exclude a blind man, we already would have known the blind man is excluded from the city of refuge law, from the fact that it says below das. So it must be shmalina, below raos is l'rabos, it's assumed. Therefore, counterintuitively, we say that he killed him without seeing, it comes to include the blind man, even though generally speaking, the blind man cannot see, but in this case, it means to say that he's also liable for exile, because we see that there are two limitations, and we have a general rule in miut achar miut el rabos, and so therefore the Gemara is saying that in general we say that Rameir says partial knowledge is not going to be considered knowledge. Partial knowledge of situation is actually not knowledge. And so therefore you're not going to be liable. It's a very important point. Say, oh, I know a little bit about this topic. Well, you know a little bit, you know nothing, because you don't know what you don't know. That's what Rabbi Meir is saying. And that's Rabbi Meir's conclusion. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda says, whereas the Chacham say, no, if you know a little bit, you know enough to be responsible. Okay, so now we come up to the next Mishnah. And this Mishnah is referring to hold on. So we come to the next Mishnah, and this Mishnah is referring to a situation where we have Hamadi or Hana Michosno. That's somebody who says son-in-law that a father-in-law who prohibits his son-in-law to get any benefit from him. But guess what? He wants to give his daughter money, but he doesn't want his son-in-law to benefit from him. Omer could say to her, so he wants to say, if you give him straight to his daughter, then her husband will take them, because we say yad isha ki yad bala. The hand of the wife is like the hand of her husband, and the husband is going to claim it. So what does the father say? How can the father speak? He says, this money is given to you as a gift. He said, I could give you this money as a gift as long as your husband has no jurisdiction over them. But rather, we're going to say, he's saying, I'm giving this to you as a gift, but it's on the condition that it will remain in your condition. But this stipulation is not sufficient. He needs to add that this stipulation is only good with respect to what she puts in her mouth. And under those circumstances, the husband is not going to be able to claim it, but rather it's going to remain completely in the domain of the wife. Meaning to say, he has to add that clause, that which you put in your mouth, and those circumstances alone, we're going to say the husband doesn't acquire them. Why? So the Ram explains, Mishum Shemasha Tirtzi Asi Lo Mahani, tefei me'ein l'balach reshus b'hem. V'kihechad ein l'balach reshus b'hem l'chud l'ma'ani ki amaru l'travai l'nami l'ma'ani dechad l'masanim. Basically, he has to say both of them. If he doesn't say both of these conditions, it's not going to work. And that's what the Gemara is about to explain now. So the Gemara, as a background, we should say that this Mishnah is like the position of Rabbi Meir in Kedushin, Daf Chav Gimel, who says that a wife cannot acquire anything without her husband. And so therefore, when her father stipulates that he's giving something to her on the condition that the husband not have any authority over her possessions, the stipulation is going to be nullified and the husband will be able to acquire it. However, when he's adding on that the husband can only acquire, that the husband will not be able to acquire that which she puts in her mouth, then even Rabbi Meir from the Mishnah in Kedushin will admit that the husband cannot acquire it. Why? Because the woman herself is not actually acquiring it until it comes into her mouth. Because her father says, "I'm only giving it to you on the condition that you eat this," and then at that point, it's not worthy, or there's no ability for the husband to acquire it because you're not able to acquire something that's in the mouth of your friend. So that's the explanation of the Mishnah. So Rav says, "Lo shanu." When do we learn this principle? Only in a circumstance. Lo shanu ela de amar la mashat no senet no seven no tenes b'fich. Only where he actually adds that line. Amar masha tirtzi asi. But if he says to her, whatever you want, you could do it this. Kana yason baal. Then the husband can in fact acquire them, because even though he said to her that your husband doesn't have an acquisition over it, your husband is acquiring it. That's not enough. He has to say also that it's going straight into your mouth. That's the position of Rav. Shmuel Amar Afilu Amar Ma Sheterti Asi Lo Kana Yasan Baal. Excuse me, wait, I read that wrong. So Rav says, Lo Shanu Ado Amar Ma She'at Nosenes Beficha. Under those conditions, the husband's not going to acquire it. But if he says what Masha Tirti Asi Kana Yasan Baal, but if he says that which you want, you could do with it, then the husband will acquire it. Shmuel says, yes, I feel Amar Masha Tirti Asi Lo Kana Yasan Baal. Shmuel argues with Rav, and he says, Shmuel says, even if he says whatever you want to do with it, you can do with it, the husband still has not acquired it. And so therefore, Rav is ruling like Rabbi Meir that the husband acquires everything. And so therefore the only way he can transfer it to the daughter is by saying it on the condition that you put it in the mouth. However, Shmuel, even though he admits to Rav that the Mishnah is in the position of Rabbi Meir, he rules like the Chachamim, who says basically that the wife can acquire something if it's said separate from her husband. He says, I'm giving this to you on the condition that your husband doesn't acquire it, then the husband does not acquire it. So that's the fundamental dispute between Rav and Shmuel. So the Gemara says, Maskef for Rabbi Zera. So Rabbi Zera challenges this. Kaman Azla Hashmai to the Rav. So are you saying that Rabbi Meir is saying that the wife acquires everything, and even if he tries to give it to you, then without your husband acquiring it, it's not going to work? Kaman Azla Hashmai to the Rav. Like, who does the following teaching go like Rav? That when Rav says that only if the father says to the daughter, I'm giving this to you on the condition that you put it in your mouth, will it work? That must be Rabbi Meir, who says, Yad Isha Yad Bawa. That must be like Rabbi Meir, who says the hand of the wife is like the hand of her husband. However, we have a contradiction. We have a contradiction from the Mishnah in Erevin. Let's say this takes us back to Erevin, Geschmack. So let's say you have an alleyway that has several courtyards. And so therefore we know that you're not allowed to take anything from your courtyard into the alleyway, because the alleyway is similar to the public domain. And the courtyards are similar to the private domain. And if you would think that you're going to be allowed to take it from the courtyard into the alleyway, then people make the fundamental mistake that you're also allowed to take from private domain into a real public domain. But if the people from the courtyard want to take it out to the alleyway, what do? They need to make what's called a shituf mavoy. They need to make a partnership or an eruv that they're all in one courtyard together, and they can all carry away, and therefore they could carry it from the courtyards into the alleyway. So keitan mishtatvim b'mavoy. How do we make this partnership in the alleyway? Meniach as a chavis. One person takes a barrel. V'omer harezel kol b'nei mavoy, and you say this barrel of wine belongs to everybody in the who opens up into the alleyway. And you don't actually have to give it to the alleyway. You give it to the person, but you could say that their servant or their maid is able to acquire it because they can acquire it on behalf of their boss. And through their daughter and through their wives. And so they're also able to acquire it on behalf of the person. And if you want to say according to Rabbi Meir, that whatever the wife acquires, automatically the husband also acquires erev lo nafik mershuta debal. Meaning to say that the erev never really left the domain of the husband. And so therefore the people of the alleyway have never acquired it. Meaning to say it has to actually leave his own domain by giving it to, he can't just give it to his wife, he has to give it to their servant or their maid servant. He can't just give it to his wife because it has to, in order to acquire something, it has to leave your possession. So therefore, if you're saying that the wife is like the husband, then the owner of the barrel hasn't actually transferred it from his possession. So it's a contradiction. So how do we deal with this contradiction in Rabbi Meir? So he says, even though Rabbi Meir says in general that the wife's hand is like the husband's hand, he admits it in this circumstance with respect to the partnership in the alleyway, that because since the husband himself wants to give it over to his wife just for the purpose of other people acquiring it, miyad bawa zachia. So therefore, she's accepting it from her husband on behalf of other people. So therefore, it's going to work. So the Gemara says, is this really the case? So the Gemara says, we can't accept it. But Ravina challenges this, that we find a contradiction between this Mishnah, Erevin, and the Brisa, because we see in the Mishnah that you could put the Erev on behalf of his own wife, or in the Brisa it says, and these are the people who you could say can acquire the Erev on behalf of all the people in the alleyway. That it says explicitly through his son and his daughter who are adults and his slave and the servants. And these are the ones who can't acquire it. It says explicitly that the wife cannot acquire it, that his own wife cannot be zocha on behalf of the people of the alleyway. And so this is a contradiction to the Mishnah. And so therefore, because Rava, this is a problem for Rava, because Rava said that when the husband gives it to his wife, he intends for her to acquire it on behalf of everybody else. When the Bryce, it says that the wife can't do it. She can't acquire it on behalf of other people. What's our Mishnah talking about? Our Mishnah is talking about where the woman has a courtyard in that same alleyway. And if the woman will not acquire the Erev, she's going to prohibit all the people from the alleyway to take anything out from that courtyard to the alleyway, because there's several different courtyards leading to that alleyway. And so therefore, she needs to acquire for herself. And the reason why she can acquire for himself is like Rava says, that when the husband gives it to her, he intends not for her to take it as a gift, but rather for her to acquire it on behalf of everybody else. In this case, since she's able to acquire it for herself, she's also able to acquire for everybody else. And so therefore, it's not a contradiction from the Brisa, because the Brisa is talking about where there is no house in the courtyard, and therefore the woman is not able to acquire it on behalf of the other people. Okay, we'll obviously repeat this on Shabbos Kodesh, but this is the Daf Yomi for Shabbos.